So we're focusing on the idea of a good life. How do you live a good life? And obviously we have a theme that goes along with each month. We know that the good life is not possible without Jesus. He came that we might have life and have that more abundantly. We've talked about how, look, if you want the good life, there are some things you have to give up. There are things that actually get in the way of living the life that is made possible through the grace of God. We spent most of the time this month saying, look, the good life is a life of love. But I want to use today, both lessons today, to talk about the good life and wisdom. You got to have wisdom, the wisdom that comes from God, if you want to have a good life. This lesson is going to be a little bit different. It's not your traditional, 2 or 3 points all building around a common theme. We're just sifting through the book of Proverbs, looking at different verses, kind of topics. We'll look at about 6 or 7 this morning, come back and look at, another 6 or 7 tonight. What does this specific book, I think we've got God's wisdom throughout the Bible, but specifically in this book, what does God tell us about how to live a good life? And the first word, it's actually the passage that Kip just read this morning. This book begins with the idea of fear. And I understand somebody said, well, perfect love casts out fear. We're not talking about, fear of judgment, fear of condemnation. We're talking about a healthy respect and reverence, maintaining the right perspective of God. And so you have in verse 7, just 7 verses into this book, the fear, listen to it, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. What a terrible, revealing thing to say about people who live foolish lives. They won't listen. They despise wisdom. They won't listen to, their lives could be so much better, but they're either too proud or too arrogant, too hard-headed, too foolish to benefit from the wisdom that comes from God, from His Word. Again, the fear mentioned here could be understood as reverential awe or respect. I've benefited a lot from the commentaries that Denny Petrillo wrote for the Truth for Today commentaries. He says Solomon begins this key proverb by discussing the primary element of education. And he says, well, listen, it's fear. It's having this reverence for God. It's having this respect for, the sovereignty of God. The object of fear obviously is the Lord. God is great. Man is not. God is all-powerful. Men have limited power. God knows everything. We know some things. But listen, without the proper perspective of the Lord, the information given within the book of Proverbs is worthless. Now, this statement, I think, is so important. Fearing God is the most important component involved in the acquisition of good information. We need good information. We live in a world that so many things are changing. There's so many different ways that people view life and politics and morality. And if you're really going to get good instruction for how to live, there's all kinds of competing voices that want to tell us how to live, what to value. You really got to have a fear for the Lord if you're going to get the kind of information that will help you navigate through all the challenges of this life. Now, in contrast with what Solomon says here in Proverbs, David in Psalm 36 and verse 1, I think on your outline, I might have a typo there. It's not 36:10, it's 36:1. But listen to how he describes the sinful and the wicked. He says they have no fear of God before their eyes. They don't fear God. Reverence for God, respect for His Word are essential to a successful life. And without that fear, we're easily led astray into a life of wickedness and sin. We just don't respect God or revere Him enough to listen to His voice. We start with fear, and then we build upon that healthy respect for God. We add to that the idea of trust. And so this is chapter 3, verses 5 through 7. First, fear, and then trust. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. Listen, in all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. Notice, He says, look, don't be wise in your own eyes. Here we return to that original theme, fear the Lord, right? And turn away from evil. Rather than depending on our own wisdom, we must put all of our trust in the Lord. This proverb goes hand in hand with the previous one. Again, notice it's the fear of the Lord that teaches us to turn away from evil. We're listening to God. We're learning from God. We trust God. We have important decisions to make in our lives. Sometimes you come to that fork in the path and you don't know what direction should I take. Well, don't trust your own judgment. Don't just, so often you hear people advising young people, just follow your heart. Don't follow your heart. Listen for the voice of God. Put your trust in Him. And notice what He'll do. If you, instead of leaning on your own understanding, if in all your ways you acknowledge Him, He'll show you the right path. He'll lead you in the right direction. Now listen to what Solomon says in the book of Ecclesiastes. All has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Listen, fear God and keep His commandments. This is the whole duty of man. Some translations, I think you don't really find that word duty in the original text. What it's really saying is this is the whole of man. This is what humanity is all about. Fear God, keep His commandments. I like the New American Standard Bible. It says, because this applies to every person. There isn't anybody that shouldn't fear God and keep His commandments. This is the way to live a good life. That applies to everybody. If you want to stay away from evil, if you want to live a good life, respect God, revere God, fear God, trust God, because ultimately He is the source of wisdom. Now listen to this. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. And in all you're getting, get understanding. Wisdom is so important. And we're talking about, when we talk about wisdom in Proverbs, we're talking about God's guidance for us to show us how to live this life. And all you're getting, I like that phrase, you're getting all these, you're accumulating all these things. In all of your getting, well, get wisdom. In context of Proverbs 4, and I thought this was really interesting, it's something that Solomon learned from his father. If you're in chapter 4, look at verses 3 and 4. It's going to be on the screen as well. But he says, when I was my father's son, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he also taught me, and he said to me, let your heart retain my words, keep my commandments, and live. A father is saying to his son, listen, I'm giving you instruction that you need to listen to me. You need to take these things to heart. Listen to your father and do what I'm telling you. And notice what he says in verse 5. He says, get wisdom, get understanding. Son, listen to me and do what I'm telling you. And here's what I'm telling you. Get wisdom. Get understanding. Isn't it interesting that years after, he's talking about his childhood. He's talking about the fatherly advice that was instilled in his heart. And years later, God's going to come to Solomon Solomon is going to follow David. David, the first king of Israel. Solomon's going to follow him. King over God's chosen people. God has a special covenant with Israel. Solomon's now the king over the chosen people of God. And God says to him, ask what you wish me to give you. 1 Kings 3 and verse 5. Can you imagine? God is speaking to him and says, anything you want. You can ask me for anything and I will give it to you. Now, I wonder how much Solomon's request for wisdom was influenced by the instruction he received in his father's house. Those formative years of his childhood, he was taught that wisdom was the most important thing. His father said, listen, above everything else, get wisdom. And he must have remembered that early training, and he put it to good use. God says, ask me for anything you want. And he says, I want wisdom. He asked God for wisdom, and God gave it to him. One author pointed out that we love to acquire things, land, houses, money, a multitude of other possessions, but for a happy and contented life, we need to get heavenly wisdom. We need to get perceptive understanding. And all, again, that phrase, in all you're getting, and all of your accumulating of things, don't forget, get wisdom. How do we get that? Well, James says in James 1 and verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Don't underestimate the importance of God's wisdom. Get wisdom. Well, how do you get it? Well, ask God, and He'll give it to you generously without finding fault with you. The next word is focus, and you don't actually find that word in the verse, but I think you find that idea in Proverbs 4:25 and 27. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths of your feet. Can you just really let that, give careful thought to the direction. How are you living? What course are you following through this life? He says, listen, give careful thought to the paths of your feet and be steadfast in all your ways. Now notice, do not turn to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. The original language suggests that we must be so focused on the right path, we don't even blink. I mean, we are focused, we are dialed in on taking the right course. The imagery is of a father. He's got his son by the shoulders. He's behind him, and he's pointing. He says, do you see that point off? Fix your eyes out there. Don't go to the left. Don't go to the right. Just stay focused on that point. Sometimes, as parents, we're not going to be able to complete the journey with our children. We're going to come to the end of this life's journey before they do it, and we're giving instruction. We're saying, this is where we want you to get to heaven. We want you to be with God forever. Fix your eyes on that point. Don't deviate. Don't turn to the left. Don't even blink. Straight ahead. And I'm just telling you, happiness in life requires that we stay focused on the right path. It's so easy to wander off the path. Another proverb, Solomon says this, that there's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. And that makes it really hard to stay focused, because sometimes even our feelings deceive us. There's a way, it seems so right, but just because it seems right doesn't mean that it is. And sometimes we take a path that the whole world might endorse, that the whole world might say that's good or that's right, or they might give approval. You think you're going the right way. Not only is it not the right way, it's a path that leads to death. It leads you away from the life-giving presence of God. In harmony with what Solomon taught, Jesus said there are really two roads in life, and He urges us to make a good decision because each road has a different outcome or destination. Very familiar passage from Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it, but small is the gate, narrow is the road that leads to life. Only a few find it. And when you combine what Solomon said with what Jesus said, I think it can feel a little counterintuitive. And what I mean by that, what I kind of was mentioning a moment ago, sometimes the wrong path seems right. It seems right because there's so many other people going that way. Well, this must be right because everybody else is doing it. And sometimes the wrong path feels right because it's easier. It's not that hard. Everybody else is doing it, and it's easier, and it seems like it's the right path. And sometimes the right path feels wrong because you look around and not many people are going that way. You kind of it kind of can be confusing. Well, if this is right, then why aren't more people doing it? And why is it so difficult? Why is the easy way, the popular way, why is that wrong? Why is the hard way, the path that so few people seem to take, why is it so difficult? How can that be the right way? And yet, that difficult, narrow path leads you in the right direction. If you get on the wrong path, Jesus said it'll lead to destruction. You get on the right path, it leads to life. And so, fear God. Trust God. Obtain that wisdom that comes from Him and stay focused. Everybody here is on a path. Nobody else, chose that for you. You've made decisions. You're headed in a certain direction. Are you comfortable with that? Is that path leading you where God wants you to be? Listen, there's so much wisdom. Simple. These things aren't hard to understand. The challenge with so much of God's wisdom is not reading it and going, I just don't get it. It's reading it and saying, that's abundantly clear what He's saying, but it's really hard to do. Well, this wisdom is designed to help us make better choices and keep us on a path that leads us to the heart of God. The next word, phrase, or idea is work ethic. And it's amazing. We could look at a bunch of different verses, but just for this morning, Proverbs 6 through 11, go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, scarcity like an armed man. I think this is the first of many references to the sluggard in the book of Proverbs. He's going to return to that theme many times throughout the 31 chapters. The father in this context is telling his son not only to go to the ant, but to observe. That means examine, inspect, study diligently. The objective is to get him to imitate what he sees by watching how the ant functions. He wants the young man to learn and understand the value of a healthy work ethic. Ants don't need someone to tell them to work. They don't need a time clock or an overbearing supervisor. They work because it's part of their nature. It's part of their character to work. They work with wisdom. They work with intentionality. They gather and store in the summer months because they somehow know that when winter comes, the opportunity to gather food will have passed. And through diligence, they prepare for the future. And so the application then should be obvious that those who are wise work without having to be told to do so. They don't need to be commanded or pushed or prodded. There's a link between the good life that God wants us to enjoy and doing honorable work. It's through hard work that we're able to provide for ourselves, that we're able to provide for the people who depend on us. It's kind of shocking that the language that Paul uses, the way that he says this so bluntly, but 1 Timothy 5:8, he said, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. You say that you're a lover of God. You say that you're a follower of Jesus. You're trying to live according to the Bible. You don't take care of your own family. And he says, well, people like that are worse than folks that don't even believe. And then in his second letter to the Thessalonians, he said, for even when we were with you, we gave you this rule, the one who is unwilling to work shall not eat. Laziness, slothfulness, these are barriers to a happy life. No one can enjoy a good life if they're unwilling to work. They end up becoming so poor that they can't provide for their most basic needs. It's like they got robbed. That's part of the language there in Proverbs 6 through 11. It's like they got robbed by an armed assailant who took everything they had and left them completely destitute. That's what laziness does. And it's why it's so important to have a healthy work ethic so that you can meet your own needs. You can take care of your family, your loved ones, those who depend on you, and you can be generous to others who may be going through a hard time. The last word we're going to look at this morning is the word contentment. Proverbs 15, 16, and 17. Better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. Better a small serving of vegetables with love than a fattened calf with hatred. Those verses are linked by the word better, and they force us to reevaluate our attitude toward the endless accumulation of material wealth at the expense of personal peace and contentment. If you take those statements and you turn them in to questions, there's a tendency to give the wrong answer. Which is better, right? Little money or a lot of money? I think a lot of people would look at that and say, well, I think a lot of money is better than a little money, right? Which is better, a dish of vegetables or fattened calf? I don't know about you, but if I'm going to the steakhouse, I don't want the veggie platter, right? Unless there's some health problems or you're one of those people that probably don't want to eat with me. I go to breakfast and somebody gets this blended green drink. I'm like, come on, man, bacon and eggs. What are you drinking over there? Why would you choose that? The choice seems obvious to me, right? And it's supposed to, in the proverb, you're supposed to reach the conclusion one of these things seems better than the other. But here's the point. A simple meal with friends who love you is much better than an extravagant feast with people who can't stand you. It's so much better to eat a simple meal with people that make your life better than it is to have just an incredible feast with people that don't really care about God's best for your life. I think people who don't have much money always think that life would be better if they had more, but wealth does not solve every problem. And I think what a lot of people don't consider is that along with wealth, and the word is in the text, along with wealth, you often get turmoil. No amount of money is worth the trouble that it sometimes brings. And so Paul reminds us in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 6, godliness with contentment is great gain. And I know we're going to be thinking about that idea of contentment in May. I think the good life and contentment, we've got to learn to appreciate what we already have instead of being miserable because we don't have everything, that other people have or everything that we think, we'd like to have. Sometimes we just need to be thankful for the abundance of God's blessings that we currently possess. Jesus not only warns us to watch out or to be on your guard against what he calls all kinds of greed, he also then makes this statement: life does not consist in the abundance of our possessions. Bottom line, at least as far as Solomon is concerned, a home filled with God and love is better than a home that's characterized by hatred and turmoil, even if that home is filled with great riches. So be content with what you have and continue to fear the Lord and trust Him. We're not gonna cover all of the wisdom in the book of Proverbs in 2 short lessons. The goal today is to whet your appetite for greater insight through personal study. The challenge here, if you'll bring up, read one chapter a day for the next 31 days. Several years ago, Dale had shared with me this idea. If you do Psalms and Proverbs together, 5 Psalms, 1 Proverb, you can get through Psalms and Proverbs in 31 days. Well, if you start tomorrow, by the end of April, you can read every chapter. And I don't think this book was ever designed for you to sit down and read all 31 chapters at once. I think it's better to just read a little bit each day and then spend more time thinking about what did God just say to me in this special book of wisdom that He's given. I hope some of you will consider doing that, a chapter a day for the next 31 days. Let me just say this as we conclude. The wisest thing that you can do is to surrender your life to Jesus. The wisest thing that you can do is listen to His voice, learn from His teaching, obey His commandments, and imitate His example. It's the best way to live. He's the only person who ever came into this world and lived a perfect, not an easy life, but a perfect life. And can I just tell you, we're talking about a book of wisdom. It is wise. It is the wisest thing you can do is live up to the level of your understanding. All I mean by that, as soon as you know what God wants you to do it right away. I think there's real folly in knowing how to please God, but deciding you're going to do it at some future point.